Welcome to the Profitable Public Speaking Podcast. I am your host, Marc, Guberti, CEO and founder of the Content Marketing Plaza, bringing you 2 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to get on more stages and make a profit from your public speaking. And one of the big things about public speaking is that you have to get out of your comfort zone in order to pursue it. And for some people, getting out of that comfort zone is really hard. And even for well-established public speakers who they've been speaking for a while, to really push the envelope requires that we get out of our comfort zone. So today's guest who joins us today, he specializes in not just getting out of the comfort zone himself, but helping others get out of that comfort zone as well. So he's passionate about helping people overcome obstacles and make choices that inspire them to live their best life. He is the founder of Entrepreneurs in Recovery, which he started as a way to transform the lives of over 5,000 men and women in addiction recovery through one-on-one coaching, facilitation, writing, and speaking. He recently published his first book, Smash Your Comfort Zone with Cold Showers. Today's guest for episode 13 of the Profitable Public Speaking Podcast is none other than Jesse Harless. Jesse, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Marc. Honored to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Jesse, I'm so happy to have you on the show, and I'm looking forward to talking about the comfort zone because smashing it is so important for achieving success as a public speaker and achieving success in any area that you're going after. So we'll definitely talk about that. Before we do, though, can you share a little bit with us on just how your whole public speaking journey began?
Yeah, so as someone who's been sharing his recovery story of addiction for many years, that's really where it started. So, 22, I got into recovery from addiction and I started to share my story. It's like part of the culture. So to share what happened. And after sharing it, oh my God, I don't know, hundreds of times, you start to realize as your journey progresses and you progress as a person, you learn new habits, you learn new abilities, you get out of your comfort zone, you get new mentors, you start to share differently. And so I started to share about like personal growth. I started to share about breakthroughs. I started to share about things that people weren't really talking about in the circles I was in. And so what happened was I started to get asked to speak at different places than I normally would be speaking at. And that got me to think about new content. Like I couldn't share about the old content anymore. So I needed to share about, personal growth and development, things I was doing. And that's what I started to do. And eventually that led to, being, it's kind of going forward quite a bit. It led to speaking on, a stage with 400 entrepreneurs and one of my greatest mentors and actually speaking before someone who was worth like $100 million and just like, how did I get there? But again, it was just starting with sharing my story for 20 minutes, in front of a group of people who wanted to hear about it. And eventually it led to much bigger opportunities.
And it's interesting you mentioned you share your story. And I feel like if you do put stories in your public speaking presentations, they're definitely going to be a lot better because we love to listen to stories. We're programmed that way. And I feel like, though, there are a lot of people who maybe they're not into sharing their story, let alone in front of over 400 people. So how did you get more comfortable with sharing your story and getting a little vulnerable with it?
Yeah, I mean, I got comfortable with just sharing like the stuff that was about me, whether it was painful memories or triumphs, but I got comfortable with sharing that stuff over and over again. And what would happen is as I started to add in different elements of, let's say, a habit I was doing, what would happen is people would come up to me and say, after I spoke and say, hey, thank you so much for sharing that. I've been listening to people for 30 years and I've never heard anyone say that about fear or about a morning routine or about cold showers, right? So there was something that I said during the speech that was something that someone hadn't heard before. And that was really a way to spark interest. So I think just sharing my story, being vulnerable, and then eventually having more content, right? Because if you're just sharing your story, that's great, but people need some content. And so eventually it became, okay, what can I talk about that's going to ultimately help people to smash fear or to, make a decision to become an entrepreneur? What would that look like? That type of talk. So, today I now talk about that journey of fear. How do you get through the fear of just any fear, but specifically fear with, getting into recovery from addiction, or fear from leaving a job, or, I can't talk about things I haven't experienced, right? I can't give something away I don't have. So I only talk about the things that I've actually done.
Yeah, and it is interesting you bring up that fear, because it is certainly something that makes people stay in that comfort zone. It's the fear of messing up on the stage. It's the fear of doing something and realizing that it might not work. And I think really getting to that fear is a big part of getting out of the comfort zone. So I wonder if you could talk about how we can address some of the big fears that we have and just being able to plow through them.
Yeah, I mean, probably the first fear I would imagine most people have with speaking is just speaking, just getting on the stage and doing it. And I remember, when I first got asked to speak on a bigger stage, I was terrified. And, I'm more, I might seem like more of an extrovert, but I'm definitely in many ways more of an introvert, and more along the highly sensitive person route. So I like my alone time, and I don't always like being surrounded by people. So speaking in front of 100 people, 200 people or more was very uncomfortable. So, I have things that I've set in place. Like, one thing I do is I mind map. So before I'm going to share a speech with anyone, I'm going to mind map my speech. So it's a visual representation of this path that I'm going to take people through. And if I don't have that path in my mind as an image, that I really, in some ways, I feel like I have no business being on the stage. I mean, the good news is you don't have to memorize every part of the mind map, but, because inspiration will come. But for the most part, like a tool would be, have a mind map. That relieves so much anxiety when I've mind mapped my speech 10, 20 times before I hit the stage. So I think that's one of the big tools that I use.
Yeah, mind mapping is certainly really great. I feel like a lot of the reason people are fearful or they can't get out of the comfort zone is because they don't know what steps to take. And once you lay it all out and you have that clarity, it is certainly easier to take those steps. And I know you do help people get out of that comfort zone. One of the things you mentioned was cold showers. That's something in your book. I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the ways you've helped people get out of the comfort zone, whether it's public speaking or, even something more general like pursuing a goal or something like that.
Yeah. So cold showers is a journey that I've started taking in 2015. It was a journey that was had intention behind it because, I struggled with social anxiety. So we're talking about speaking in this, and I struggled with social anxiety most of my life, even into my 30s. And so someone suggested cold showers. Long story short, I started taking straight cold showers. And what happened was I became a more confident person, actually relieved my social anxiety. And it took time. It wasn't an overnight matter. No habit really is. So over time, though, I started to severely reduce my social anxiety and then boost my confidence. So this became a lifestyle habit every day. It was like brushing my teeth. It was the same thing. You have to shower anyway. So why not just make it straight cold? And by doing that, I started to tackle huge obstacles and I started to play outside my comfort zone. So the overcoming the social anxiety was a big one, but, boosting my energy and being more ready to tackle things that scare me every day. That's a big part of my book is do one thing every day that scares you. If you're not scared, you're not playing big enough. Those type of ideas. You have to get out of your comfort zone. And how do I do that if I physically don't feel like it? Jump in a cold shower. That will physically change the way you feel.
And I mean, definitely when good habits like taking a cold shower can really have a big impact on your life, boost your confidence, and all that really compounds in the kind of effect it can have on your life. And cold showers, I mean, I've tried it. I get the idea. It really wakes you up because someone else recommended it. But for me, I just couldn't keep doing them. But I understand what you get from a cold shower. But I'm wondering if you could share with us some other habits that you would say have been pretty essential for you as achieving your success and also being able to thrive as a public speaker.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, right? I mean, we're made up of habits. 95% of our day is made up of unconscious habits. So, start to choose those habits. So I'd say that the habits, I mean, there's so many. I mean, one of them is elevating your mind, reading books. Like if you want to become a public speaker, read, listen to podcasts, watch videos, watch documentaries, fill your mind with information that's relevant to your genre. Who are you speaking to, right? So like I'm speaking to people who are entrepreneurs and people in addiction recovery and personal growth. So like, I love to read all kinds of different books and listen to all kinds of different podcasts. So fill your mind, elevate your mind with podcasts and books. I mean, another one would be, you can journal. Like it might sound crazy, but start journaling your day every day. Like I've been journaling for 13 years and I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just saying it because a mentor of mine at 22 told me to write down your story every day. Write down some gratitude, write down some like 3 highlights of the day. And I started to do that 13 years ago. Now, 13 years later, I still do it. And guess what? Guess how much content I have now for my speaking, right? I can just go back to the journals.
I didn't think about that.
Exactly. 13 years of it. So those are some ways to start, I would say, with those habits.
Yeah, and I've heard about the journaling, but I never really thought of the public speaking element to it because you can get a lot of ideas just from that journaling. And I know you mentioned you help people with addictions, and part of the addiction is like a stream of bad habits that follow. So we talked about some habits you use that currently work, but for anyone who feels like they have a bad habit, and I think for a lot of us, those bad habits are pretty obvious, how can we combat those bad habits?
Well, I mean, if there's something in your life that's causing you serious stress and it's affecting your relationships and it's affecting your work and it's affecting you showing up in your life as your full self, full potential, right? Then there's something you really want to take a look at. So something you want to pay attention to. So, I mean, there's so many ways to skin this, right? Like if you're someone who is struggling with a certain addiction, that's different. If you're struggling with drugs and alcohol, that's different than having like, let's say a bad habit. A bad habit would be like, I bite my nails all the way down and I don't have any nails left because I'm biting them off. And it's causing me issues because, it's causing me pain in my nails. That might be a bad habit. So, how would you stop that? Well, you could get therapy for that. You could probably read some books about that, obsessive compulsive, whatever. And but if you're struggling with, drugs or alcohol, I mean, that's a little different because that's something that a lot of people don't have an awareness to be able to stop. And so to be able to find ways to do that, I mean, you can find countless ways to do this. 12-step groups. There's, you can get a mentor, you can read books, but you got to find what works for you in your recovery journey. So, bad habits or addictions, I mean, that's a personal journey for each person. For me, like with social anxiety, or with, let's say, caffeine, I would actually say it's a bad habit, but it almost could have been an addiction too. And I would say, how did I stop that? Well, I replaced it with something else. I can't just stop habits. I have to replace them with something else. And so, so I replaced it with cold showers because that was a big primer and gave me enough energy and confidence. I also replaced it with other eating habits and fasting. Intermittent fasting was a big one.
That's interesting. Replace the bad habit with another habit. Have that substitute in place so that it's easier for that replacement to happen. And I think that's a really great insight. And I feel like we've had a lot of great insights throughout this episode. For people who want to learn more about Jesse, he did come out with his new first book, Smash Your Comfort Zone with Cold Showers, which will be in the show notes. Jesse, are there any other ways that we can find you on the web and keep following you on your journey?
Yeah, I would say check out recoveryfacilitation.com if you want to learn about the work I'm doing today in the world. And also check out jesseharless.com if you just want to learn a little bit more about me. That's, I'd say, the best places to find me.
Jesse, thank you so much for sharing those resources and all the great insights with us. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Marc. Appreciate it.